First question, how do you know if your child is in burnout? I'll just preface all of this by saying I am not an expert on childhood burnout, but I have lived through it, and I have worked with many, many families whose children are in burnout and who come out of it using the low demand approach. There are a couple of markers. Often it is a sudden or a steady decrease in capacity as your child's world narrows and narrows, and their window of tolerance, their capacity to handle fluctuating stress levels decreases either rapidly or consistently. It comes along with the loss of skills. So oftentimes there's the loss of ability to access basic needs, so to speak, to move, to eat, to toilet, or to sleep. Burnout is not an exact science. There is not a formula for how it is supposed to look or what it looks like to heal. However, I will say that the majority of kids who go through burnout are, especially if what they're experiencing is autistic burnout, that until they receive radical accommodation and learn to integrate those accommodations into the daily habits of their regular life, they will remain in cycles of burnout. So for many autistic adults who do particular work around their burnout, they trace their first burnout back to about age 6. And I've worked with a number of families whose children burned out at around age 6 because of schooling, but not exclusively. Burnout typically happens because the demands around the child are exceeding their capacity to cope over a long enough period of time that their nervous system goes into a freeze or a shutdown. It is a hyperprotective mode where they're so dysregulated that they're spending the majority of their waking hours in a stress cycle, and they're unable to leave that stress cycle. And so because of this persistent toxic stress, their body begins to shut down in order to, as a protective sign. So that's why I say that until those accommodations are fully integrated and that nervous system is able to perceive signals of safety that exceed the signals of threat, they will remain in burnout. How do you care for a child in burnout? Well, the very first thing to do is to go ahead and unlearn all of the things that you've been told up to this point, or things that you've believed about yourself or your child. You are not a failure. You have not done something wrong. You didn't cause this. It's not your fault. Also, you don't have a bad kid. This isn't a behavioral problem. Your kid didn't do anything wrong. It's not hopeless. You aren't stuck here forever. You aren't doomed. This is not a colossal failure. This is actually a protective mode that your child has gone into in order to heal. I like thinking of burnout as the cocoon, that the old life, that life that you were living before your child was a caterpillar. So this is the cocoon of healing. When a child is in burnout, one of the first things that often gets lost is the parent's ability to trust that child. It feels like you're seeing a whole new kid. You don't know them anymore. They're acting different. And the sense of trusting connection gets lost. And so that's where I would have you focus right now. What if you can trust this period? What if you can trust this child? What if you can trust this time to teach you what it needs to? This is a wintering season. You are shedding all of the old ways that didn't work and finding a new path forward. This is a time for dropping, for letting go, for pruning, for saying no. It's a time for asking for support and help and nurture. It's a time for getting all of the deep care and rest that you can. The last question I'm going to answer this evening is about sleep and rest. And how do you access rest or sleep when your child's sleep is impacted? A couple people spoke to this in different ways. The way it usually looks is that a kid begins staying up later and later. They might even get to the point where they're staying up all night and sleeping during the day. This is a very common pattern in burnout. And also, often, and sometimes that kid is able to stay up late or all through the night without another nervous system to regulate them, without their parent being awake as well, but often they need that. And so then the question is, well, how do I get enough sleep when I need to stay up late and then not getting enough rest for me? So these are really hard questions to answer, and I'm going to just offer a few thoughts. First, I just want to speak to the systemic brokenness of our system, that many of our kids are in burnout and their their baseline diagnosis is not even recognized, or the fact of childhood autistic burnout isn't recognized. And so we're getting not only zero support from the systems that exist, but active judgment and shame and persecution and all kinds of negative things coming because of the way that our child is impacted because of their diagnosis and their medical needs. Also, that is going to intersect with all of the systems of power and powerism. So it's all the more vulnerable if you embody any kind of marginalized identity or have to intersect with systems of power where you don't have privilege in order to move through it. So I just wanted to say, context, massive failure on the part of our institutions to support us and our kids. Also, global systems of power and privilege are intersecting here. So with all of your intersectional realities and with the massive failure to support all families, but especially families who are caring for disabled children, we're going to do the best that we can. And rest comes in many forms. So, when I was learning to rest, learning first just to not be busy, and then to sit still, and then to still my mind, and then to actively lay down, and then to close my eyes, and then to access sleep. All of that can be really challenging when you're in burnout or parenting a child in burnout. If you can't sleep in the night right now, can you access sleep in the day? If you can't access lots of continuous hours of sleep, can you access bite-sized pieces of sleep? If you simply cannot access adequate sleep, what are the demands in your day life that are too hard in light of the reality of your current sleep situation? If you can create a scenario where you are in communication with your child. Some kids can't do back and forth communication, can't hear verbal speech, can't articulate verbal speech when they're in burnout. So for many of our kids, collaborative problem solving is simply off the table. But if your child has access to collaborative skills, can you work together on a solution that honors both of your sleep needs? Last note on rest is to remember that in addition to dropping and releasing expectations that don't feel realistic right now in light of your capacity to access rest, what can you add in that is enlivening or rejuvenating? Something that I've learned in conversation with some other friends on here is that some days and some realities, some of our kids' sleep disabilities are so profound and so extended that there just isn't a time where good sleep is coming. And so you need to really focus on what does it look like to supercharge your energy? Does a walk or a bike ride or a conversation with a friend or listening to a non-sleep deep rest protocol or doing a caffeine nap where you have a little bit of caffeine and have a quick rest, what rejuvenates you?